Have you ever wondered how close you've come to danger without even realizing it? At Shivering Vault, we take you there, one story at a time. But before you drift off, consider liking this video, commenting where you're watching from and at what time, and subscribing to keep these chilling stories coming. Now, let's dive into these unsettling tales. It's been almost a year, but it still feels like yesterday. I live out on the edge of a little town in Missouri. I've been renting this trailer for a couple years now. It ain't big, but it's just me, so it does the job. I work part-time down at the hardware store in town. It's a pretty quiet life overall, and I like it that way. My trailer sits on the edge of a small park, like maybe 20 or 30 other units spread out, lots of trees around, and not a lot of noise, especially not at night. The park kind of fades off into some woods behind my unit. Real pretty in the fall, with all the trees turning orange and yellow, leaves everywhere. You hear the wind move through the trees, maybe a few dogs barking now and then, but usually it's dead silent once it gets late. I keep to myself mostly. Just me and my TV, a couple beers at night, and an occasional phone call with my sister who lives down in Springfield. Anyway, this happened last November, right after Thanksgiving. I remember that because I had just come back from visiting my sister and her kids for the weekend. Drove home Sunday afternoon, unpacked my bag, and settled in for the night. I was feeling lazy, so I threw on some old reruns and microwaved some leftover stuffing she packed for me. By the time it got dark, I was in sweatpants, laid out on the couch, just relaxing. I think it was a little after 11 when it started. I remember the TV was on low. I was watching King of the Hill, something like that. And all of a sudden, the porch light clicked on. It's one of those motion sensor lights above my front steps. Real sensitive sometimes, so I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe a possum or a gust of wind. Happens. I glanced out the window. Didn't see anything. Porch was empty. Yard was still. The trees weren't even moving much. Still, I figured it was just the wind, and turned my attention back to the screen. But then, not 5 minutes later, the light clicked off. And maybe another 3 minutes after that, it came back on again. That's when I started to feel a little off. I looked out the window again. Still nothing. But the way the light was just clicking on and off, something didn't feel right. I stepped to the door, opened it just a crack, looked around. The whole yard was quiet. Leaves scattered all over, the wind barely moving them. I didn't hear anything. No footsteps, no rustling in the bushes, just cold air and silence. I shut the door and locked it. I remember that clearly. Then I sat back down, turned the volume on the TV a bit lower. I don't know why, maybe just a gut feeling. I wanted to hear better. You know when your body just knows something isn't right, even if your brain hasn't caught up yet? That's how it felt. Then it clicked off again, then back on. I stood up slow that time. Didn't go straight to the window. I waited. I stood behind the curtain for a second, listening. Nothing. Then I peeked through. That's when I saw him. Crouched low, real low, at the bottom of my porch steps, just outside the light, half hidden in the dark. I froze. He was dressed in dark clothes, hoodie or jacket, couldn't tell exactly, and he wasn't moving. He wasn't even facing the trailer, not directly. He was sideways, like he'd been sneaking toward the steps and then just stopped, like he thought I'd seen him. His arms were held real tight to his sides, knees bent, face down just a little. I backed away from the window real slow. I moved to the kitchen, grabbed my phone, and called the sheriff's department. I was whispering into the phone, and I remember the lady on the line, the dispatcher, telling me to stay calm, stay inside, and that they were sending someone out. I told her someone was outside my trailer, real quiet, hiding near my porch. She stayed on the line with me, kept telling me to breathe and lock all the doors. I had already done that, but I double-checked every window and door just to be sure. Even shut off the TV. Now the only light was the porch, still glowing outside. The silence after that was thick, like the air had weight to it. I couldn't hear anything, but I felt something. That kind of dread that sits heavy on your chest. And then I heard leaves crunching. Then more. Footsteps. Circling. Someone was walking around the trailer. I tiptoed to the bedroom window and peeked through the blinds. The light was still on, but now he was standing at the gate, just standing there. And he was staring dead at the trailer. I couldn't see his face clearly, but his posture, it was wrong. His hands were at his sides, but stiff, like he wasn't relaxed at all, like he was waiting. I whispered everything to the dispatcher. She told me to keep talking to her, keep calm. That's when he started walking toward the door. I backed away, holding the phone in one hand and grabbing the biggest kitchen knife I had with the other. Then came the knock. I didn't move. I didn't speak. And then the door handle rattled. Not hard at first, just like he was testing it, jiggling it back and forth. Then it got more forceful, like he was pulling on it. He must have known it was locked, but he didn't care. He was trying to open it anyway. Then he started pressing against the door. I could hear it groaning under the pressure. My trailer isn't some high-end reinforced thing. It's just a regular aluminum door. Nothing that would hold up long if someone really pushed. I told the dispatcher he was trying to break in. She said the deputy was close, told me not to open the door, not to shout, just stay hidden and quiet. Then he slammed on the door, both fists, over and over. Each hit made the whole frame shake. I gripped the knife so tight my hand went numb. I was half convinced the door was going to give in any second. Then, suddenly, headlights. A pair of bright beams washed over the yard. I've never been so relieved in my life. The man didn't even look back. He just bolted. Took off into the woods behind the trailer, disappearing into the dark, dead trees. The gravel crunched under the deputy's tires as he pulled in fast. 2 officers jumped out and took off after the guy, but they never caught him. They searched for a good half hour, flashlights cutting through the trees, but it was like he vanished. I gave my statement, shaking like a leaf the whole time. They stayed with me until almost 3 a.m. One of the deputies sat with me while the other drove around the area, but they never found him. He never came back. It was around mid-October. Me and 3 friends decided to go camping. We figured, why not? The leaves were changing colors, and it was the perfect time to get away from the city noise. We picked this spot about 2 hours outside town. It's a state park deep in the woods, the kind of place people usually avoid as it gets colder. The campsite was almost empty, which we liked. We didn't want a crowd or noisy neighbors. We drove up, unloaded our stuff, and set up our tents near this small clearing surrounded by tall pines. The air was crisp, a little chilly, but not too bad. We made a fire, cracked open some beers, and sat around talking about nothing important, the usual campfire stuff. Everything felt peaceful, like we were the only ones out there. But then, just before dinner, one of my friends, Jake, decided to go check out a trail he saw winding into the woods. He said he'd be back in 10 minutes. When he came back, he looked weird. He told us he'd found another campsite down the trail, one that looked abandoned. We figured it was nothing, probably some careless campers who left early or something. But Jake described it like this: a tent ripped apart, like someone had cut through it. A fire pit that looked like it hadn't been used in a long time, but was still charred black, like someone burned trash there. And food wrappers, empty bags and cans, strewn all around, like whoever was there left in a rush. What creeped us out was that some of the gear looked new, like not old or weather-beaten like it had been sitting there for months, but stuff that looked like it was bought recently. We didn't know what to make of it, but shrugged it off. Maybe some irresponsible campers. That first night, we all went to bed around 11 after the fire died down. I was in my tent with Matt right next to me, and the forest was so quiet it was almost unnatural. No crickets or owls, just silence. Then, around 1 a.m., I woke up to this crunching sound. It was like leaves and twigs breaking under someone's feet. I nudged Matt and whispered, "Did you hear that?" He said, "Yeah." But when we unzipped the tent and shone a flashlight outside, nothing was there. No shadows, no shapes, just the dark trees swaying in the wind. We went back inside and tried to sleep, but I kept hearing that sound off and on for the next hour. Morning came, and we all got up to make breakfast. When we checked the cooler we'd set near the fire pit, it was dragged a few feet away, and the lid was cracked open. Some of the food was gone, not much, but enough to notice. We looked around, but saw no footprints or anything else suspicious. We didn't talk about it much, just figured maybe an animal got into it. But then things got worse the next night. We decided to keep the fire going a little longer, trying to shake off the weird feelings from the first night. We told ourselves it was probably just animals or some pranksters messing around. Around midnight, I was just about to crawl into my sleeping bag when Matt nudged me and said, "Hey, look." I looked toward the edge of the clearing where the trees were thick, and I saw it, a faint beam of light moving slowly between the trees. It wasn't steady, like someone was waving a flashlight around, but it kept circling the campsite at a distance, never coming closer, but never going away either. We all saw it and stopped talking, watching it move. My heart started pounding. "Who the hell is that?" Jake whispered. "No idea," I said. "Maybe someone lost or drunk?" But no one made a move. We stayed quiet and just watched as the light slowly moved around the perimeter, never entering the clearing where we were. It was like whoever it was didn't want to be caught, but also didn't want to leave. After a few minutes, the light disappeared into the woods and we all just sat there in silence. None of us slept well after that. The next morning, we were all on edge. The food in the cooler was missing even more, and we found some footprints around the campsite that weren't ours. They were boot prints, fresh and heading back into the woods. That's when we decided to be extra careful. We moved the cooler inside the tent with us and kept all our stuff close. We even thought about leaving early, but we didn't want to seem like cowards. That afternoon, while we were exploring the area a little further down the trail, Matt noticed something strange. "Guys, come check this out," he called. We found another small clearing, and there, half hidden behind some bushes, were some makeshift signs nailed to trees. Nothing official, just rough wooden boards with warnings like "keep out" and "no camping." Some had scratched out words and weird symbols carved into the wood. It didn't feel like someone joking around. It felt like a serious warning. We talked about it, but didn't know what to think. Maybe the people living here didn't want visitors, but who'd go to this much trouble just to scare campers? That night, none of us said much. We barely ate, and when the sun went down, we sat by the fire, flashlight beams crossing nervously through the trees, trying to catch any sign of that flickering light. Around midnight, just like before, the light returned. It circled the camp again, slow and steady. This time, Jake tried shouting into the woods. "Hey, we're not here to cause trouble. Show yourself." Nothing. The light flickered, then suddenly went out. The woods got completely dark, except for our little fire. We all jumped when a branch snapped somewhere close, maybe 20 feet from us. Matt grabbed a stick and stood up, shining his flashlight toward the noise. But we saw nothing. No movement, no eyes reflecting back, just shadows. The next evening, we were all ready to pack up early. Nobody said it out loud, but we were done. The peaceful trip we'd hoped for had turned into a nightmare where every shadow felt like a threat. We kept the fire going, but it was small and mostly for comfort. Around dusk, we heard the crunch of boots on the trail. We all froze. Then, out of nowhere, 2 park rangers appeared. They introduced themselves, saying they'd been following up on reports from campers about thefts, strange noises, and people seeing flashlights around the campsites late at night. We told them everything, about the torn tent we found, the missing food, the strange light circling our camp, and the weird signs nailed to the trees. They explained that there had been a group of squatters living hidden in the forest for weeks, maybe months. They survived by stealing food, camping gear, and supplies from campers like us. The Rangers had been tracking their movements, but hadn't found their base yet. So they organized a quick search, asking us to stay close while they went into the woods. We followed the main trail with our flashlights, cutting through the thick, dark trees. After about 20 minutes, one ranger stopped and pointed. "Look there," he whispered. Hidden behind thick bushes was another campsite, like the one Jake found the first day, but much larger and more organized. There were several tents, tarps strung between trees, makeshift fire pits, and piles of stolen gear scattered everywhere. Coolers, lanterns, sleeping bags, backpacks, all stuff obviously taken from other campers. It was like a small village hidden in the middle of nowhere. One ranger carefully stepped closer and called out, but there was no response. They found footprints leading away, some fresh. The squatters had clearly been watching us and moved before the rangers got there. The rangers gathered up all the stolen gear and said they'd be back with backup to catch whoever was living there. We packed up as fast as we could that night. On the drive home, I couldn't stop thinking about those people living out there, sneaking around campsites in the dark, stealing from people who just wanted to enjoy nature. It was terrifying to realize how close we'd been to running into them, and how easily they could have hurt us if they wanted. I used to work at this little coffee shop in a small town in New England. You know, the kind of town where everyone knows each other, especially the people who live close to the center. Our place was tucked right between the post office and an antique shop, both of which closed way earlier than us. I worked the late shift most nights. It was always quiet after 7:30. I didn't mind it though. I liked the calm. Fall was my favorite time of year too. The streets outside were always scattered with orange and red leaves, and the air had that dry, crisp feeling that clung to your clothes. Most of the people who came in after 8 were regulars grabbing coffee on their way home from work or stopping by to chat before heading home. But around mid-October, this one guy started coming in. I don't even remember the first time exactly. He just kind of became part of the background. He always came in about 30 to 40 minutes before close. Same thing every time. Black coffee. Sat at the corner table by the big window, farthest from the counter but still in direct line of sight of the register. At first I thought he was just a quiet, maybe shy guy. He wore the same dark jacket every time, sometimes a hoodie underneath it. Always had the hood pulled back though. Pale. Probably mid to late 40s. Hairline receding a bit. Never smiled. What started bothering me was the way he looked at me. Not like a normal glance or anything. He just stared for long periods, like he was studying something. He never brought a phone or a book or even earbuds. Just sat there with his coffee, which he never drank, by the way. It always just sat there getting cold, staring at me. I remember telling myself I was probably overthinking it. Maybe he was one of those socially awkward people. Maybe he had nowhere else to go and just found comfort in the routine or the warmth of the cafe. But over time, it started to feel less harmless. One night, we were dead after 9, and I was wiping down tables. My coworker had already clocked out earlier. As I passed his table, I felt his eyes lock on me again. I looked up and tried to give him a polite smile, but he didn't even blink, just kept staring. I moved away quickly. What really messed me up started a few weeks into him showing up. It was a Thursday night. I remember that because Thursdays were when I got home early enough to watch this true crime show I liked. I had made popcorn, curled up on the downstairs couch, and watched 2 episodes before going up to bed around 1 a.m. The next day, after my shift, I walked out to my car. The parking lot was mostly empty by that time of night. My car was parked near the edge, close to the trees. I saw something stuck under my windshield wiper. At first, I thought it was a flyer or maybe a parking notice. It was a small note, folded in half. No envelope. It was written in this scratchy, cramped handwriting. It said, "That lady who was kidnapped in last night's second episode, she reminded me a lot of you. Same voice, same living room, too." I stood there frozen, holding that piece of paper. My stomach dropped. I remember looking around automatically, but there was no one there. Just my breath fogging up in the cold. He had seen me, not just at work. He had seen me at home. That's when I knew this wasn't just some creepy guy who liked the cafe. He was following me. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even stay downstairs. I locked myself in my room with a baseball bat next to the bed and left the lights on. I tried to tell myself it had to be some messed up coincidence. But deep down, I knew. After that, I started noticing little things, like how the same car, a dark green Toyota, I think, kept showing up across from my place. Not parked right outside, but just far enough down the road that it wasn't suspicious unless you were paying attention. Sometimes I'd look out the window at 1 or 2 a.m. and it'd be there, headlights off, just sitting there. I never saw anyone get in or out. The next few days at work, he was back at his usual table. Same blank stare. I couldn't focus. I kept fumbling orders and dropping stuff. My manager asked if I was okay, and I told her I was just tired. I didn't know how to explain it without sounding paranoid. Then, one night, things escalated. I closed up by myself. It was close to 10:15 by the time I locked the front doors. The parking lot was empty again, except for my car. I got in and started driving. I was already paranoid, so I checked my rear view more than usual. That same dark green car pulled out a few moments later and kept a steady distance behind me. At first, I told myself it could be anyone, someone just taking the same route. But when I took an unexpected turn, one I never usually took, the car followed. Every turn I made, it mirrored. I remember my hands were shaking so bad on the steering wheel, I thought I might crash. I was about to pull onto the highway when, out of nowhere, another car pulled up beside me at the red light. It was my friend Ellie. She recognized me immediately and waved. I saw her eyes narrow as she looked behind me. The green car must have noticed her too, because as soon as the light changed, it made a sudden right turn and vanished down a side road. I pulled into a gas station, and Ellie followed. I was shaking. I told her everything. About the guy in the cafe, the note, the car, all of it. She convinced me to go to the police that night. The cops actually took it seriously. I gave them everything I could. What the guy looked like, the time he came in, the note, which I had saved, the description of the car. They pulled the security footage from the cafe. What they found made me sick. He wasn't just sitting there staring at me. He was watching everything, every movement. And after I left each night, he waited in his car, sometimes got out. There was footage of him walking around the parking lot, circling my car, even trying the doors. They pulled footage from surrounding businesses too. They caught him outside my place, just sitting in that car, waiting. A week later, they arrested him. His name isn't important. What matters is that he had a record, 2 prior stalking charges in different states. I didn't sleep for weeks after that. I still double-check every lock. I moved a few months later and left that job, but I still can't forget about that guy. That's it for today's tale from Shivering Vault. If you have a story worth sharing, drop it in the comments or send it our way. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your fellow thrill seekers. As always, the Shivering Vault thanks you for unlocking today's tale. Until next time, the vault awaits your return.